Good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg Avagnoni.
bringing you this week's Living Ascension. So, gotta love when we get guidance to do these topics before they're primed.
For the really relevant.
Yeah. And it was so funny that last week it was like we got off the air after we were talking about how truth is variable and, and how to start to be able to see that and accept it and live with it. And then literally, what was it like when we were off, like right after when we were talking for a couple of minutes, we're like, and it feels like the next one is all about how to live that. Cause the ego says, well, how can we really do that? How can we live in a place where there are variable truths in everything?
Right. How can we live in a world of no absolutes when you want nothing but absolutes?
Right. And then look at what happened at the end of last
Right. And the thing that kept coming to me all weekend long was that win or lose, right or wrong, it all depends on what your goal is.
Yeah. Right.
And that, without considering that, how can you say if something's good, bad, right, wrong, advantageous, not advantageous? I mean,
I feel like I'm even yawning right away. And what she means by that, and she and I had this conversation on Friday, is, well, what's the end game? What's our goal? Right? Because we think the goal is to progress in one way, right? And so then we accept that as our truth. And then that's what we set all of our sights on, right? Is that's what we're
expectations, everything.
Right. And that's actually where I found I had the biggest implosion this weekend with all the stuff that was going on, going on in our collective, institution in the United States right now. So, it's like, well, so what's the goal? What's our goal? When we set a specific goal, though, then we set certain truths to have to accommodate that. Right. And then we're like, but what if the bigger goal, and every set of goals, so every individual has their own goals, and then every family has their own goals, every community has their own goals. And so you have all of these goals, all of these truths that are moving, concentrically bigger and bigger and bigger. So then all of them, if they don't align, just cause consistent conflict
and chaos.
Yes.
Well, and I know that looking at where judgment falls in all this, really, it kind of bends my mind, because I sit here and I want to be judgmental about it. But what if all of my goals couldn't happen unless this would have happened?
Right.
And being so short-sighted and knee-jerk reaction about it almost would negate all of my more expanded consciousness goals.
Right.
Because I'm judging it as wrong, bad, counterproductive.
Right.
And you really, we created this.
Yeah. Yes, we did. And so I've been asking, so what is this about? What is this still a belief in within ourselves that we created outside of us? Number one on that. Number two is, what is it there to motivate us to do? Because we wouldn't have been motivated to do otherwise. Right.
Right. Which, I noticed the tone of the emails I've gotten through, I don't know how I got on some of the lists I got on, but various emails about changes in support of different political candidates based on this result alone. Well, if that's the result of this, then that is a positive from it.
Right.
To light a fire under people and say, if you really want change, then don't just sit there and be happy with what's happening.
Right. Right. And the thing is, how far are we, and you and I have talked about this in other contexts for so long about, well, oh my God, I can't stop yawning now. We get in this duality, in this density, we are in this really deeply ingrained habit of needing a propulsion to go someplace.
Right.
Or believing we need a propulsion to go someplace. So is it that we believe that if we don't, how about this on the other side of that? Do we believe if we don't propel ourselves, then nothing's going to happen, or it's not going to progress, or we're not going to change? If we don't just change, right?
Right.
Will that not be effective enough because we believe that the only way to emit change is through some deep propulsion? Right.
Mhm.
So there's another truth. There's another
Right.
possibility. There's another
Well,
like, okay, well, we don't believe that. So now, okay, we're getting too complacent. And guess what? We didn't do this from this set of situations. So now we have to make it bigger. Like we've said, how many times, right? We've got
right.
to make it bigger until we start to pay attention and actually get off our butts and do something to change.
Right. I mean, as you're talking, I'm seeing myself sitting there and knowing somewhere in my consciousness that I am always everywhere all the time,
Right.
but choosing to turn off all the lights and only hold a little tiny flashlight,
Mm-hmm.
so that this is the only thing I focus on, which is within that small beam of light. And based on that, what I see, I make judgments and create my truth.
Mm-hmm.
And say, okay, this is my truth, that all walls are red because my little flashlight, everywhere I shine it, is only red.
Mm-hmm.
But if I turned on the light and I was everywhere, the truth would be totally different.
Right.
So if I can allow myself to turn around, oh, all the walls are blue now.
Right.
So my truth is totally different.
Yep. Absolutely.
And we have set our goal to forget that the lights are on everywhere and that we're everywhere, and that it's just a question of changing our focus, not needing a propulsion.
Yes. Yes. And it's simply just a shift. Right.
Hey,
And so
Michael.
good morning, Michael. And we say it over and over again, but then it's like, well, do we do it? Yeah. There are many things we just say, okay, well, that's not a priority right now. That's not a squeaky wheel right now. So therefore I'm just
Right.
going to let that lie. And
Or
sit.
that creates a sense of angst within me. So I'm just going to just shine my flashlight only right here.
Yes. Yes. And so then we get stuck in that, because then you have billions of people shining flashlights in little tiny places, and most of the time not overlapping each other.
Right. And and for their corner of that little reality, that is their truth. So that's why they can become so impassioned or embroiled and passionate about it, because they believe it. They know it to be their truth, because that's their little tiny world.
And the thing beyond that is that, which is understandable, right? Because that's part of what we wanted to create in separation. The thing that is to change and to shift, the thing that is to change and to shift is our attachment to that truth, like putting value to ourselves based on our truth, like saying that truth creates my value, right? So then that's where the ego gets vehement about defending that truth, no matter what. No, like, even though maybe you get better batteries and the light expands, right? But now it's like, oh no, but then that would prove me that I'm a bad person or a wrong person, or that I had a limited perspective or whatever. So I have to now vehemently defend this particular little piece,
Right.
even though the bigger piece is being presented to me.
Shown to me, right.
Yeah. And so because I have now connected, I have identified with that truth and created my value from that. And that is where we are. We have so much desperation to cling on to individual truths instead of looking at the bigger picture, that all it has become is one big peeing match.
Right. Right.
In general, when it comes to politics, when it comes to bigger picture stuff. And, it's funny because it's completely the opposite of, because the thing that I've been really sitting with is the more we have collectively opened our eyes, or have been opening our eyes, right? The more this shutting down seems to be like
the clash, right? And the clashes just get more and more intense.
Yes. And so then the question becomes, well, okay, if we can consider that there are so many different truths, right? Even the ones that are not mine,
right?
And they're valid, just like mine is, right?
Yes.
How do we live with that? How do we do this differently? How do we exist in a place where even if we say, I can see all parts of this, right? You have 95% of people around you who cannot. And then you have all these, like debates, and the ego wants to engage. The ego really desperately wants to engage because it wants to put value to its truth.
Right.
It wants validity to its truth too, right?
And I think that as we escalate things, it's our attempt to come to a place of connection with others, because if we expand and intensify and ramp everything up, we'll eventually get to the place where the whole planet is falling apart and we have no choice but to come together as, at our very basic, we all inhabit this earth.
Yeah. And that's the cataclysm, right?
That is. And it would be nice that if we could come to those places sooner. And it used to be that we could come together as a community or as a state or as a country or as a, but we're pushing it so far that it's going to be, there's the potential for it to be, we have to come together as either humans or inhabitants of this earth to make things different.
Or we're going to wipe the slate clean and do it.
And then the question is, what's the end game? Do I want to speed that process up?
Right.
Do I want to fuel all of this? And if so, why do I care about global warming? Why do I care about drought? Why do I care about recycling? Why do I care about all this? Because I just want the end. I just want things to resolve, be done. Or do I want to slow the process? Do I want to have it be a gradual, more gentle? And that's judgment. Again, that's judgment about what's gentle.
Well, and inequalities abounding, right. Social inequalities, legal inequalities. And that's what's really rearing its ugly head, because it's like, oh, okay, well, that didn't, like, that whole last 2.5 years in some way did not, motivate you to change. Okay, well, let's put something else in place now that's going to be a bigger point of contention, that's going to hit a deeper trigger. Right. And if that doesn't work, guess what? There's one right behind it and another one right behind it, until it gets so big that either we implode to that point, right? And it's like, okay, well, the environment's not motivating you. Oh, well, this isn't motivating. It's like, okay, well, this is what we're doing. And it's all us. It's not anything outside of us. It's not, like some God out there or whatever. It's us. We are
some
God.
Alien influence.
No, we're them too.
Right.
All us going, okay, well, we knew how dense we made ourselves, literally dense. Right. And figuratively dense that we made ourselves. So, like, to get over this hump, to get past this to the end game of the bigger picture with the whole light on everywhere, is for us to push ourselves to do this, because we're not, like, embodied in this density, this part of our consciousness has been so embedded to like only be motivated through discomfort, only be motivated through anger and fear and ego-based energies and emotions. Right.
Exactly.
So like we've been talking for a decade, more than a decade, about finding a space of unconditional love, finding that unconditional love for yourself, focusing on that more than anything else, because then you don't need motivation for anything.
Right. Well, and honestly, I find myself, when I focus on that and when I spend my time there, I feel such relief and such calm and such optimism. And it's only when I step out of that it just gets so sad
Yes.
and
Right.
hopeless.
Absolutely.
And I have to say, it's hard to try to straddle the two because they are so diametrically opposed.
Yes.
And
Yes, it is challenging, because you know what brought up for me this weekend, because I was going, why? I feel like I'm wearing this weight of like 5,000 pounds, like all weekend.
Right.
And I was trying to just be present with it. I was doing my best to let it flow, to be observant, to be detached, right? Even when my ego was like screaming, right? To watch my ego scream instead of getting lost in it, that kind of thing. And the triggers, because then I said, okay, I gave myself 48 hours, just go ahead and just get your screaming and stomping and everything out. And now, like, what's the trigger? What's really the trigger? Because nobody can ever take anything from you. Nobody can take your own sovereignty from you. Nobody can take your divine rights from you.
Right.
Except those you allow yourself to give away. And we've collectively been doing this now. We've collectively started, now we're collectively checking in on these triggers that we thought we had managed. We very obviously had not,
Right.
And I discovered within myself, there it was when I woke up at 5:30 this morning, which seems to be my wake up day time these days, right? And I just lay there and this stuff hits me and it's like, oh yeah, now I see what the weight is, or what I believe the weight is. And it's all me. It's all me.
Right. Well, and I was looking at similar, and I felt that I needed that external permission to have certain rights and certain beliefs about myself. And
Right.
again, that points me in the direction of, okay, so what do I do with that belief? How do I free myself from that belief that holds me in that space?
Yeah.
And it always comes back to that. What's that here to tell me? Just like we talk about in the presence, and once I listen to that, can I then ask that to leave? Yes.
Yep. Well, that's what I'm in the process of now, which I still haven't quite done, but
Well, and it's almost like when you get sunburned, you have to go through the stages of, first there's the heat, and then your skin gets dry and kind of tight and uncomfortable. And then if you sweat or get hot, then you get the tiny little blisters. And then only then does it start sloughing off and peeling away. And of course, this is a mild sunburn, not a 3rd degree. But
well, yeah, and then you have the itching, right? The edgy itching right before that happens.
And I just feel like I am in the process of that, letting it go, letting it come out and up and out, and peeling off those thin layers.
Right now is the blisters. That's what I'm saying.
Right. And I just, and it's staying with it.
Yeah. And staying observant. Right. Not observing it without getting lost in it. Yeah.
And not creating any additional self-harm.
Right.
In saying, oh my God, why is this taking so long? And why are you so stupid? And why do you care? and all that negative self-talk that we've learned. We've grown up being taught how to do. The TV teaches us that. Every social media, everything we immerse ourselves in reinforces it.
Well, and that's where I think that's become a detriment to us, because then we get those voices so loudly all the
Right.
time, then we get lost in that, right?
I mean, the connection and the fact that it has brought the world to be so much more connected and small has
Right.
been amazing. But it's one of those things where it's a knife can cut both ways.
Yes. Yeah.
And
it's
it can be used to reinforce and to teach us that, okay, even in the midst of this, you can still love yourself. How strong is your self-love?
well, and it sounds, and the ego just wants to fight, like fight that. Well, my self-love is doing this and doing this. And it's like, no, because that's your external validation. Right.
And standing up for my rights and
well, and there's nothing wrong with staying up for your rights. Actually, the thing is, when you come from a place of unconditional self-love, you don't give a shit what anybody else says, excuse my French, but it is what it is.
right.
You are
It
what
just
you are.
is.
You just are. And there is nothing you can take away from me, because this is what I am. This is who I am. This is my truth. Right. And that's why we created the individuality, but we've lost that in the external validation and needing other people to tell us what we can be and what we can't be and all that kind of stuff. And that we can be equal or not equal, or do this or not that. And there's a way around this. And it's funny because what's really interesting is how, though you and I had this topic down last Monday after we got done with the thing, we had our Friday discussion, and it came across my phone while we were on the phone. That whole Roe versus Wade was overturned. It was on the phone, and you and I were on, like, it was like you and I just didn't even know what to say about it at the time, because we were just like, wow, look at how that fits right into our topic for this week. And that's all we could really say, right? But the thing was, there's so much, and I know I have trained myself into the habit over years and years of practice. So I get this. This is not a natural thing for us because we're so out of the habit. Is my first reaction, like the emotion came later. My first reaction is, what is there for me to do with this? What is there for me to be with this? Right. And I got remember I said I got nothing. I got no answer. There was just silence. And it was that morning before we even knew this was happening or whatever. I woke up at 5 a.m. and I felt so agitated. And I was like, why do I feel so agitated? What is, like, there's something there. And it was so weird. And I was like, and all this world stuff and the government stuff starts flooding in. And I don't think about this. This stuff does not ever bother me. And it started flooding in that morning. And I was like, wow, I don't know what to do with this. Like, I could feel the irritation. I could feel the triggers. And I would say, and that's when I was asking, what do I do with this? Before all the decision and whatever came through or whatever, I was like, what do I do with this? And what do I be with this? And it was nothing. I got just this silence. And I'm like, well, obviously it's here for something. Right.
Having is evidence of wanting.
Right. And so then this, while we were on the phone, I got that notice and sitting with this, and I at least had my consciousness about me to say, all right, my dedication is I'm going to allow the emotions to come because I know they are there. And then I'm going to not act on the emotion. I'm going to let the emotion flow through. And then I'm going to ask, what is there for me to do? And what is there for me to be? And honestly, I didn't really start clearing, like the mud didn't start to clear until maybe more like this morning. I was going to say last night, but more like this morning. And yet somehow I had a party this weekend, and it was a great party, and we had a great time, and it was a whole bunch of like-hearted people together, and in a good place. So I think that was like what we do to keep ourselves going. Right. And so.
Well, I found myself, home with just my dogs this weekend, and temperatures just very extreme. And, we're in a drought, so there's no rain. And I felt like everything was closing in on me. It's like I couldn't go out. I could go outside, but it just really wasn't a positive experience to go outside. I
Right.
would watch my plants wither in the sun and know that, do I choose? How do I spend my money? Do I water my plants? Do I water me? And I started just getting lost in that and just feeling that hopelessness. And I also, kept asking myself the question but where's my gratitude for this? Where's my gratitude? My gratitude is that even though it's not raining, I can turn on my tap and have water. And I'm grateful for that. And I had to bring myself back to being grateful for what there was, and that I'm in my cool air conditioned home, comfortable.
Mhm.
And my dogs are not the bobcat I see in my front yard, just so hot because it has nowhere to escape. So it was and I allowed all those emotions to wash through, but tried to keep my anchor as in the gratitude for what I did have and where we were. And if this is the way out, then I'm grateful for that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's all these things because yeah. So when everything started coming through for me yesterday afternoon, it was more of, oh, here are the triggers. Now the triggers are coming up. Like this is what the trigger, but not in a way, in a productive way. It was in a productive way of,
Right.
here are what the triggers are. Here's what you're feeling. Here's the weight and what you still hold. Right. And then there's this whole, I went down this whole path, and I'm still working through it. But I
Right.
went down this whole path of, okay, well, let's look at, and the thing to play with ourselves. And I do this a lot with, I've done this a lot with clients when we say, I don't know why I do this, or I don't know why I'm so upset, or I don't know, blah, 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 or I'm just upset because of this. And it's like, well, let's look under that. Let's look
Right.
beyond that. Like, why do you care? Why do you care? Why do you care? Why do you care? Until you get to that place of that self, that self responsibility, which we have an entire course on in
That's
Wonderland.
right. I have one of my daughters always uses the term, well, my husband does too. Well, let's unpack that. And I feel like I spent the whole weekend with a set
Oh, huge
of
unpacking.
luggage that are like the Russian dolls. And it's like you open, okay, well, let's unpack that. Well, it's just another suitcase. Okay, well, let's unpack that. Well, it's
Right.
just another suitcase.
Yeah, the Russian dolls for sure. Yes, that's really what it's about. And that's good. That's a great thing because it helps us to bring this stuff to light. And though it's very uncomfortable and very irritating, right? It's like, well, first you have to unpack it. So like one of the many things that came up for me had to do with this. Our generation, we grew up with having this freedom, and it was a foundation of equality that we didn't even have to think about because it was already there. It was a foundation. And from there is what our generation was, breaking the glass ceiling and doing this and, pay gap stuff and all. And like, we didn't feel like that was anything we needed to focus on because that was already a foundation.
It was taken care of.
Taken care of. So what I felt like was, okay, so I spent a couple decades in corporate, and it was like, I always had to prove myself. Like I always had to do 4 times as much as some of the men around me. I had to do blah, blah, blah to get, like 3/4 of the way as far. And then I did progress, and I was very successful in it. And by the time I left, things had shifted significantly. And I felt like I didn't have like, and I realize that I felt like I'm done with this job. Like I'm done with this job, meaning having to be a part of this energy. I'm just going to go and do my thing now.
Right.
And that was 16 years ago. And I started my own business. And then it's like, well, then I create it however I want and whatever. And so I've gotten to a place in my life where I feel like I have created exactly what I wanted. Right. And so that felt like it pulled out that whole foundation.
Exactly.
Like that I wasted decades of my life on something now that we're going back to not even square one, square negative one, right?
Right.
To find that. And it was like, but really, what's changed?
Well, and as I said to one of my daughters when we were discussing it, I said that it'd be different if they had come out and said, we're going to overturn this because the bottom line is it's none of our business.
Right.
It's none of our business, and government doesn't have a right to mess in your health care at all, ever, period.
Yeah.
But that's not the way it was couched. But that's what it could turn into.
It could, but it won't. It won't. Not with the way things are right now, and as inflamed as they are, or whatever. But the thing is, because if truly that was the intention, because my husband and I had a lot of discussion about this, if that was truly intention, then it would just be put in the Constitution that nobody could screw with anybody's rights to have adequate medical treatment on anything.
Exactly, and that's the way it should be.
Exactly. So it's not, so anybody who tries to veil it as, oh, just the government passing it off is, no, it's not. It's a personal truth that's being imparted into the power that they can employ in the government by validating themselves, by making sure that other people adhere to their truth, even if it's not the same kind of thing. And that's where we're coming into this big incongruency. And it's like, well, yeah, sure. Yeah, you're right. The government should not have any say in all that. But the thing is, that would be on another -5 fundamental thing, that everybody has equal access to the medical care that they individually require, regardless of what that looks like, regardless of judgment of anybody else on what that is, or their personal beliefs or whatever, right? So, but anyway, it doesn't even matter. Well, we can talk about that until we turn blue in the face. But the thing was that this was where my triggers all laid, was like, oh my God, decades and decades, I felt like I was able to enjoy myself and not have to be a certain kind of person to fight this fight. And then it's like, well, who says you have to fight the fight? Or who says you have to be that kind of person? Who says you have to be that kind of person? Why don't you do it differently? Like, and that's where all those things started coming up, is like, it's like, oh, well, all the triggers are just my triggers, as we've always said, right? And everybody's got their own triggers for this in different ways, right?
Right, exactly.
No matter what side of the fence you're on, you have your own triggers for it, right? And so, but the thing is, the reality is the triggers are yours and yours alone.
Right.
And so again, it goes back to looking in the mirror, because at the end of the day, I can choose to adhere or not adhere. I can I can create my reality however I choose, so that I have that. And if it doesn't accommodate that here, I can find it someplace else, or I can create it someplace else, or I can just do it differently. So I don't even need that to even think about that.
Right. And let's take that a step further and connect it back in and say your triggers are a result of the truth that you're living.
Yes, absolutely.
And I mean, you look at it that way, and it's like, that really shows the impact of the individual version of the truth. Because it's that where your interaction with others creates friction and irritation.
Yes. Yep. And so that's the key, is, all right, so why, like, the key is, all right, let yourself be irritated, right? Or righteous, or however, depending on what side of the fence you're on, it doesn't even matter, because it's not just this. There's so much contention going on at such a collective level, and so many truths that are just battling each other right now in so many different areas. This is like one of many. And it's
right. This is just the most recent one.
Right. Because what was the battle a year ago? Vaccinated or not vaccinated, mask
or no mask.
Right. And that was the other side, which I've always been confused about. I just don't understand now.
No, I don't understand. Yeah.
It's just such a confusing thing to me. but that's, and
Well,
that's
and this follows really closely on the heels of guns or no guns.
right. Right.
And I mean, it's getting to where the truths, the variety of truths are just coming one right after the other, and they're having to amplify and ramp up their unacceptabilities and their polarity to get attention, because everything is so loud.
Well, right. And it's so bipolar, right? And so and the reason it's bipolar is because it is forcing us to bring it to the surface.
It really is.
Forcing us to bring those little bubbles, those little blisters or big blisters, or however you want to put it, to the surface, right?
All that irritation that burn created is causing all that fluid to move up, to bubble under the skin.
Yep. Yep. And so, and you and I have said this, mark our words, not that we have to prove ourselves right or anything, but we've been talking about this for 3 years, that things are going to be even bigger and bigger and bigger until we change. Can we
hear all of the untold quiet truths? Michael asks.
Yeah. Can we?
We can do anything.
Yeah.
We can do anything. It's how you set yourself.
Yeah. And so that's the whole going inside. And this is like, and I know that the habit is because I at least stayed conscious enough all weekend to let it just flow through and let it come up, because I kept on asking, at least consciously asking, what is there for me to do here? Like, what is there for me to be? What is there for me to do? What is there for me to be? What is there for me to do? And today was the first, or last night was the first time I started getting an answer, because I was getting nothing for 2 days, right? Which a lot of people get all frustrated and then they throw it all in the towel. I'm like, oh, well, I wasn't like, oh, I'm doing it wrong. I'm not, and it's like, well, no. My expanded self said, yep, you're just going to need a couple of days before we even have this conversation.
Right.
And so you go at it, have fun with it, I'm holding that space for ourselves, but it's going inside, because I knew I didn't do like from Friday morning to this morning, I did not meditate formally, so to speak, even though I knew I needed it. Yesterday, I was like, I'm going to do it. And then I didn't. And I was like, I'm going to let the storm rage a little longer. I'm just going to let that go. But I did actually have things incorporated into my weekend that helped it to flow along, and it helped me to stay in a head above water kind of thing. Right. And I think part of that is staying in that conscious state of asking, what is there for me to do? What is there for me to be? And asking it honestly, without like, I'm going to go and take out all of the Supreme Court justices.
Right. No agenda.
Just what is there for me to do? And really the answer that's always going to come back to us is look at your own triggers. Look at your own quiet, untold truths, as Michael put it.
Right.
And it's this is what we're doing to ourselves, because, we've said we have cleared out so much stuff that now only the really triggering crumbs are the things that remain. And those are the things that are going to cause probably the biggest explosions.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I looked at all that within myself, I had to look at, oh, well, I still value myself based on doing all of that. Doing versus being.
Right.
Oh yeah, that was an untold truth that was underneath the surface, right? And so, but I couldn't hear that because the ego screaming. We can't hear it because the ego screams so loud often, right? So that's the key. That's why it's so important to go inside and get to that place of trusting your guidance. Also, 2 more courses that we have available.
Right. It's that internal conversation that makes all of this different.
Yes, it does.
It's that self-compassion, that self-understanding, that self-love, that self-responsibility. It's all self-based, because that's the foundation. And without that, we are where we are.
Yes. Yep. And we will continue to be where we are. We will continue to tread water until we make it so big that we have no choice but to throw out the baby with the bathwater kind of thing, which I understand, we've done many times before. So do we want to do that again, or do we want to do it differently? And we've been talking about this. That's why we call this living ascension out. This is living differently, living in a place of consciousness in every moment, even when, because here's the other thing the ego wanted to scream, or was screaming. And I was just sort of letting it scream, having its temper tantrum, was look at how much we have awakened. Look at all of what's happened, even in just the last 15 years, right? In terms of consciousness and understanding and awakening. And look at how desperately the equal and opposing force seems to be to want to shut it all down.
To counteract it.
Which means that there's a part of us collectively that believes we need to stay status quo because we love this drama so freaking much.
Right. That so much that we just want it to go back to normal.
Yeah.
Because we've come so comfortable and believe we're successful there.
Right.
Like, I've mastered that. Don't change the rules on me.
Right. So there's a lot to unpack here.
Right. Yeah. So I was going to say, so as a first step in all of this, for me, it was coming back to self, coming back to the who I am, and that I don't even want to say self-love, because that's a big step. Self-acceptance, right. And what all comes along with that acceptance, because usually to get to that place of acceptance is go, well, okay, so that really wasn't as bad as I thought it was, or even if I thought it was that bad, it's okay. And apologize.
Even if it is potentially, I don't like saying bad because that is judgment, but even if that is potentially damaging or limiting or whatever, it is being able to stay detached enough to say, okay, so what is there for me to do here? Or what is there for me to be here? Like, truly. And you might get nothing, but it'll come through. Right. And so that's probably like, it's a huge amount of trust. It's a huge amount of trust in your guidance. I would say to everyone, regardless of what side of the fence you're on any given issue,
right,
is when the ego is starting to rage, to immediately step back and say, okay, I give you 2 days. I give you the week. I give you the weekend, the week, or whatever. Have your temper tantrum. And I am going to observe it, and I'm going to dedicate myself to seeing what's underneath it. But I will also just let the temper tantrum happen. And then I'm going to say, all right, so where's my trigger? What's the trigger from? Like, and what is there for me to change that I'm still holding within myself, that because I have this limiting belief, I am creating this in the reality, this trigger in the reality around me, so that I don't have to create that trigger anymore, because it is all about me, and it is all my fault. It is all my fault that it's here, right? I don't like saying fault, but it's all my responsibility.
Right. It's all my responsibility
that it's here in my reality. So therefore there's still something, right? Yep. And so, and these are the hidden truths. That's what, when Michael's saying, how, can we hear all the, untold quiet truths? The untold quiet truths are the ones we're avoiding looking at the deepest. And that's why it's coming up the loudest in our reality around us, or else it wouldn't.
Exactly.
So, I mean, that's a big concept. And this is truly,
really is.
That's why we have an entire course on self-responsibility in the Wonderland program, because we think it's an easy thing to say, oh yeah, that's just me, right? It's not easy, because the ego is not used to saying, oh yeah, guess what? Oh, that's me. That's me. It's my responsibility that this happened in my reality.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly.
And the ego's like, like speechless, like jaw dropped kind of thing, you
Right.
know? So, all right. So yeah. How do we unpack that now? What do you think we should do for our clearing?
Um, I allow my acceptance to begin with myself. Something.
Well, if we're staying on the whole thing of truth, right? How to live the truth, right? How to live with variable truths. How do I?
Well, that I believe that begins with self-acceptance. Oh, how about I allow myself to see the truth within myself. Place to start.
Not only see, or how about like I'm ready, willing, and able to allow myself, like I'm ready, willing, and able to allow myself to see it.
Right.
In acceptance, see the truth within myself in acceptance.
Oh, I like that combination of.
Yeah. But there's something about also being able to how to be able to navigate, right? This comes back to, wow, what I just got taken back to was like probably one of the first clearings you and I did after the lockdowns of COVID, right? How to navigate.
Right.
Because now, as in the beginning of that, which was what, like March of 2020? Yeah.
Yeah.
We were talking about the being on house arrest, right? Before that ever even happened. But then we were talking about after it first happened, because there's so much now about so much contention about the power plays and, you know, conspiracy theories and who's controlling who and all that kind of stuff. And again, it's going to take us to the same place of being able to navigate.
Right. Right. Well, that's the right. The
And
value, the I don't want to say the value because that's a judgment. What's valuable and what's not valuable. One of the benefits of coming to that place of self-acceptance is a new learning or an understanding of navigating the variable truths.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, opening my heart to allow for that.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That feels good. Okay, all that was it.
Right.
All right, everyone. So close your eyes, take a deep breath, really take a deep breath into that as we step out of separation back into wholeness and oneness. And we hold ourselves at the vibration where that is our truth. That is from where we exist, create, and experience. All right. Oh, that felt like about 30 seconds and it was 10 minutes.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that was, I could have stayed longer.
Oh yeah, I need to do, there was a lot unpacking there.
Right, right.
But that was felt like it was a good start.
Yeah, yeah. And it seemed more personal versus the whole collective experience, even though I know it's there, you can't really separate the two, but I think I needed the personal aspect this morning.
Yeah, it felt good. And there was a lot of well, see, I kept on seeing it go back and forth. I kept on seeing the personal thing, and then I would see collective, right? And then there would be the egoic judgment that started coming in of, oh, well, this is overwhelming and not everybody, like we can't get enough people to do this. And it's like, just do it.
Right.
So then it would bring it back to me.
Right.
And then it's like, okay, so just do it. And then, but it felt like, yeah, I felt things started to loosen up and relax a bit, which was really nice.
Right.
So yeah, I think we all can use a big dose of that this week.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there's no reason you can't come back and do this several times a day whenever you feel the need.
No,
I mean,
and
like you said, it was 10 minutes. What's 10 minutes of your day? Fast forward to just that clearing and
exactly.
sit in that space again.
Yes. And the even just opening the heart felt really like, okay, and then this stuff is, gonna pour out, and then you're gonna open the space to allow that. And yeah. And pass this on, please, because this of many of our topics is
Really.
one of the very, very important ones for
It
all
really
of us.
is. It really is.
Please pass this on to others, and let's get into the practice of doing that, because ultimately it is the ultimate self-responsibility to say, if it is in my reality, it is my responsibility. I created it, which means there's something that I'm holding that's causing that to come up, to trigger it, to bring up a trigger, to bring those blisters to the surface and that irritation, so that I can let it go. So let me just let it go, so I don't have to do this again and again and again.
Right. Right.
Just as individuals, collective. So the more we do that on the individual level, the easier it gets to be at the collective level. And it sounds so illogical or but it's the way to do it. It's the inside out, from the inside out. So
absolutely.
So like, share, give us your perspective, follow and join us again next time, which will be next Monday. So this is Angela Colt. Oh wait, are we doing next Monday? Is it next Monday, the 4th of July? We didn't even talk about this offline.
I'm flexible.
Maybe. We'll see. Monday or Tuesday, one or the other. We'll see you next week.
Join us next week.
Join us next week. So this is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg Avignoni
signing off with this week's Living Ascension. We'll see you next time.